Blog Talk Radio.
Stevie B's Media Production is a part of the Shellcaster Network.
The proclamation of the gospel of Jesus Christ by members of the Churches of Christ with your host, Stevie R. Butler. You're listening to What a Word from the Lord radio show.
You are my protector and you are my provider and my deliverer. There's no other help I know. You are my protector and you are my provider and my deliverer. There's no other help I know. I really love the Lord. I really love the Lord.
You're listening to What a Word from the Lord radio show.
Good evening. We have you out in the world listening to this radio broadcast. Stevie B's Media Production presents What a Word from the Lord radio show. I'm your host, Stevie R. Butler, and this radio show is being broadcast from Stevie B Media Production at the Carolina studio in the great state of North Carolina. Ladies and gentlemen, we are just grateful for the privilege to be able to bring you a program where we as Christians and members of the Church of Christ can share our faith and preach and teach the glorious gospel of Jesus Christ on a weekly basis. If you'd like to contact us while we're on the air this evening, just give us a call to the live show at 713-955-0508. If you have any questions or comments for any of my special guests and my co-hosts on this broadcast, you can send your emails to my new email address, butlersteve1009 at yahoo.com, or you can give me a call at Stevie B's Media Production Studio at 910-491-6405. Now, again, this program is brought to you by members of the Churches of Christ, and if you need any assistance in locating a congregation in your area, please feel free to contact us. Now, folks, get out your Bibles and study along with us here on What a Word from the Lord radio show.
You're listening to What a Word from the Lord radio show.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special treat for you tonight. This is it's the fourth Tuesday of the month, and on the Stevie B's Media Productions What a Word from the Lord radio show, I had to change my programming around because we got some new productions that we kicked off earlier in the fall. We had the Mid-Tennessee Singles Ministry that kicked off every third Tuesday of the month. They're doing an outstanding work. And also the Kelli Fletcher show starts a couple of weeks ago, so now she's on every fourth Tuesday of the month on What a Word from the Lord radio show. So tonight, ladies and gentlemen, you're in for a treat because Kelli has a great topic that she's going to be discussing, and we're looking forward to having her and her guests on the broadcast this evening, Tina Fox. Enjoy your listening experience with the Kelli Fletcher Show. Enjoy the show.
This is Terry Jackson, and you're listening to A Talk with My Sisters on What a Word from the Lord radio show. Good evening, everyone. My name is Kelli Fletcher, and I'm your co-host. I'm a member of the Livingstone Church of Christ in Indianapolis, Indiana, and you're listening to A Talk with My Sisters. I'm thankful to God for allowing us to share another conversation that will encourage, edify, educate, and help women to improve spiritually, mentally, and physically. As always, I pray that it will do the same for the men in our listening audience. October is a month set aside to bring awareness to domestic violence. However, as we all know, domestic violence can occur every and any day of the year. Tonight, we will be discussing domestic violence, a pandemic within a pandemic, and I have a very special guest joining me this evening, Tina Fox, who is a member of Schrader Lane Church of Christ in Nashville, Tennessee. Welcome, Tina, and thank you so much for being a part of today's show. Can you please introduce yourself? Hi, how are you?
I am well, thank you, and thank you very much for inviting me. Yes, I am Tina Fox, and I am a member, as you have already stated, of the Schrader Lane Church of Christ in Nashville, and I am an assistant director of programs at the Tennessee Coalition to End Domestic and Sexual Violence. And so I have been doing victim work for over 10 years now. I retired as the state director of victim services for the Tennessee Parole Board in 2019, working specifically with crime victims for approximately 7 years, and now I am doing some nonprofit work at the Tennessee Coalition to End Domestic and Sexual Violence. I am honored to be here on this evening, as you've already stated, to talk more about domestic violence. And yes, it is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So thank you for having me, Kelli.
Yes, ma'am, and thank you so much for accepting the invitation. I truly appreciate it. To get right into it, I used to think that domestic violence was exclusive to physical abuse, but I learned that isn't actually accurate. So can you tell us what is domestic violence?
Yeah, that's a very good question to lead this discussion. Domestic violence is a pattern. You have to understand that word pattern. So domestic violence pattern of coercive, controlling behavior that can take the form of, as you mentioned, physical, but in addition to physical, sexual, financially, emotionally, spiritual, those types of abuses. And the unique thing about domestic violence is it does not have any boundaries. In other words, it doesn't matter how rich you are or how poor you are or how black you are or how white you are. It has no boundaries. And what we have found in our research is that in addition to the definition, we have found that domestic violence is preventable.
So you said it is preventable.
Absolutely. Domestic violence is preventable because it's a choice, typically that a male makes to batter, to have this power and control. We'll talk a little bit more as we get into the conversation, and thus it is preventable. So a man doesn't have to hit a woman, right?
That's
a woman doesn't have to hit a man. It's a choice. And we can't blame it on drugs and alcohol. Before you take that alcoholic beverage, you are making a choice. So alcoholism is preventable. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense, yes. And it's like anything else. We have a choice.
Yeah.
And we can either choose to do the right thing or we can choose to do the wrong thing.
Absolutely.
But like you
and
said,
I think,
no, go right ahead. Go right ahead.
No, just to that point, Dr. King coined the phrase, "It's always the right time to do the right thing." And so
that's right.
It is a choice, yes.
That's right. Domestic violence, and I attended a presentation that you had a few weeks ago. And one thing that you mentioned, and I'm kind of mixing up the questions a little bit, but one thing you mentioned is domestic violence is a hidden pandemic within a pandemic. Can you explain that?
Say that one more time.
Domestic violence is a hidden pandemic with pandemic.
Yes. And I wanted you to repeat that so that we can understand that right now there are several pandemics within this pandemic, this COVID-19, and the impact that COVID-19 has had on domestic violence. The pandemic has overshadowed the national conversation about domestic violence, as it has with most things. But when you look at domestic violence, it affects all of us, Christians and non-Christians, okay?
Right.
Domestic violence is a serious public health problem that affects millions of Americans every day. So when we look at the pandemic of COVID-19 and the fact that the pandemic has overshadowed the national conversation about domestic violence, that's exactly what we mean. If and when it is not getting the attention that it deserves and it affects millions of Americans, that's what we declare it as a pandemic within the pandemic. And one of the things I want to pause and say here is that what we know is from those who report domestic violence, my biggest concern, my gravest concern has always been those who don't report it, those who live in the confines of domestic violence and don't report it. That's alarming. That's very scary to me, and it should be for all of us because we can't help those who don't report, right? We tend to help those who are reaching out, and so that's why it's considered a pandemic within a pandemic. Another facet to that is.
Okay. Yeah, because I was looking at the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence website, and I noticed where it said 10 million people per year are physically abused by an intimate partner.
Mm-hmm.
But then they said 20,000, they received, 20,000 calls are placed daily to domestic
Mm-hmm.
violence hotlines.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at the vast difference between those two numbers. 10 million
Mm-hmm.
people per year are physically abused, but they only have recorded 20,000 calls coming into domestic violence hotlines. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, that is correct because, again, as I've stated, we have those who don't report. And so those who don't report are not calling the hotline number. Those who are reporting in or someone is reporting for them, they're calling that hotline number. However, there is a projection. We have to project in domestic violence that although 20,000 calls have been received, it has to be more domestic violence abuse than just those who are calling in. So we look at those who have reported versus a number that don't report. And again, we are almost always concerned with the group who doesn't report.
Indeed, yeah. Now, there was something else you said, and then I'll move on. But you mentioned domestic violence amongst non-Christians and Christians.
Mm-hmm.
And when you said that, I was like, interesting, but it goes back to what you said, it has no boundaries.
Mm-mm.
So domestic violence doesn't care if you're a Christian or not. And then it goes back to also what we talked about, having a choice to do the right thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So when you look at the pandemic, COVID-19, although it primarily affected or are affecting us as African Americans, it still has affected the entire population, right? And so domestic violence doesn't have any boundaries. Whether we are Christians or not, 1 in 4 women has been abused and or know someone who has. And so when you look at 4 sisters sitting in a congregation, if we only put 4 women or 4 sisters in a congregation, one of those 4 could easily testify that they know someone who has been in a domestic violence relationship, or they know someone who is currently in a domestic violence relationship, or they could attest that they are that person who has been in that domestic violence relationship. So it's real, 1 in 4. I'm not talking about 1 in 4 churches, right? 1 in 4 women, 1 in 4 sisters, sure.
Wow. Okay. We usually hear about domestic violence against women.
Mm-hmm.
But is domestic violence exclusive to women?
Yeah, so approximately 85% of all reported, and I'm going back to the word reported, right? About 85% of all reported cases of domestic violence are exclusive to women being abused by men. However, it does not negate the fact that there are women who abuse as well. And so studies have shown, and again, these are reported numbers, right? And we could contend that the number may be higher, but right now it's sitting at about 15% of all domestic violence cases are men calling in and saying, hey, she hit me or she abused me, okay? And we also believe that one of the reasons that the numbers for the men are much, much lower than women is because men are embarrassed to call in to say, hey, this woman has hit me. And so that could be a reason, not necessarily the reason, but it is safe to say that the numbers are much lower. And the importance of that is those are the ones who are reporting. Again, we cannot get away from those who don't report. So we have to include those who don't report so that if and when, good Lord's willing, they are ready to report, that they can have the same level of resources that those who do report.
Okay. Are there early signs that a person is being set up for abuse? Meaning, for example, is it safe to say that the offender's initial intention is to gain power and control over the victim, therefore being set up for abuse?
Yeah, another excellent question, Kelly. So you're right. When we sum up what domestic violence is, we have to sum it up that it is about power and control. A man primarily wanting and gaining power and control over a woman. Okay, so when we look at signs, I don't know if it's early signs, because we have to note that if a sister or a woman goes out on a first date with a man and he hits her on the first date, chances are she's not going to stay for a second date, right? Or she would be rather foolish to stay for a second date. And so typically in an abusive relationship, there is grooming that is involved, right? He is setting her up to make her believe that he is everything that she has ever needed and or wanted. So in terms of early signs, we don't see a whole lot of early signs. We do see red flags along the way. And what we have found out is that those red flags are typically ignored. Why? Because he has groomed her so much that she has become emotionally attached to him. And you know as well as I know is that once we are emotionally attached, we tend, even as Christians, we tend to forego those red flags. We tend to ignore those. We tend not to say anything because we are emotionally attached. However, when we are logical, we can see those red flags from a distance, right? Because we are not emotional about it. So in terms of those early signs, it's rare that those early signs are seen early, okay? Because remember, his entire role is to gain power and control, and he does that by grooming her, making sure that she feels good, making sure that, again, she becomes emotionally attached to him. But some of the common signs, I do want to talk a little bit about some of the common signs as opposed to early signs. You know, if a guy tells a woman, hey, telling you that you never do anything right, he's not going to say that early on, right, because he's grooming her, okay? It's along the way you may hear words like, I'm not going to allow you to go to your family Christmas party this year. That could be a common sign, okay? Showing extreme jealousy. If a man or a brother is extremely jealous of your friends, and anytime you're spending away from him, if he becomes extremely jealous of that, that is a common sign, okay? If he insults or demeans you or demeans a woman, shames the woman in front of other persons, that's his purpose is to openly shame. That could be a sign, preventing or discouraging you from spending time with your family again. That could be a sign, okay? Destroying your belongings or your home. There are so many common signs. Again, these may not necessarily be early signs because, again, he is not going to do these things early on because he hasn't finished the grooming process. Okay. Again, if he told you on the first night, "Hey, I don't want you seeing your family anymore," you'll go, "What in the world? What is wrong with you?" Right? I'm out of here. Okay. In fact, I'm calling my brother when I get home to make sure that you get this. Okay. So we have to know that in terms of early signs, they are not necessarily displayed,
right.
in the infancy stage of a relationship. It's when he has groomed and he feels comfortable enough to say, hey, I got it right where I want it, and then that's when the abuse begins.
And that in itself is scary, to think that someone is setting out to set you up to control you. That's just that's a scary concept to me.
Sure.
And so we definitely just have to pay attention and be honest when we see those signs. But like you said, once you're emotionally attached, it's hard to let go. I think what we're going to do, because we're getting close to a break, I want to hold there and then pick up with our next question after the break. Okay, if that's okay with you. So I'll turn this over to Brother Stevie for a break, and then we'll follow up with the next questions. Thank you so much, Tina.
Thank you. I'm here for it.
It ain't easy. No. Sometimes it gets hard down here, Lord. Sometimes it gets rough. So rough, so rough. Sometimes it gets tough for me. Has anybody been lonely all by yourself? Has anybody been sad, broken hearted and sad? Have you even been mad? Oh, you had to cry all night long. I know it's hard, but what you need to do, you need to wait.
And you're listening to A Talk with My Sister on What a Word from the Lord radio show. Peace and love.
Welcome back, and thank you for sticking with us over the break. I truly appreciate it. Tonight, I am talking to Tina Fox, and we are discussing the domestic violence, a pandemic within a pandemic. A truly important topic. Tina, I wanted to ask you, I know we left off with common signs of an abuser, or that someone is going to be abused. What I wanted to find out are the signs of domestic violence different for men than women? Do they experience the same type of signs?
Oh wow, that's an excellent question. Let me first say I was really enjoying the singing. Very good song.
I was too.
Yes, I had to put myself on mute so that you all would be able to hear me project, making a joyful noise. So, but anyway,
right, me too.
Yeah. So, in terms of if those signs are similar for women who abuse, keep in mind that domestic violence is about power and control. So the motive certainly is the same. Okay. However, a woman may not spend as much time trying to groom a man prior to exemplifying domestic violence, okay? Because remember, women typically, I'll be the first to admit that we are more emotional than men are. And not to say that men are more logical than we are. What I am saying is that women are more emotional. And so the power and control for a woman has everything to do with emotions, okay? That extreme jealousy is a sign that a woman could have the possibility of hitting and or assaulting a man. Of course, she won't do that on the initial night as well, okay? Because if she did, he would be logical like us and say, "Hey, hold up, wait a minute, right? I'm out of here."
Right.
You know, the first thing a guy would say, or first thing a brother would say, "Hey, man, she crazy. Hey, bro, she crazy," right? And so he wouldn't spend any additional time there. So when we look at domestic violence, those signs for men and women, we have to note, Kelly, this is very important to note that domestic violence is about power and control. And a woman does have the capability of having power and control over a man that she too has groomed, okay? The process may not be as long, but there could be an opportunity for her to engage in domestic violence earlier than a man, okay? Because remember, we are emotional.
Right. Okay. That's interesting. In your presentation on October 5th, you talked about a cycle of violence. There's the seduction honeymoon phase. Then there's the tension building phase, building phase in violence. And in the center of that is love, hope, and fear. Can you expound on those phases?
Sure. First of all, let me just say you are an attentive listener, okay, and apparently take really good notes. Yeah, so the way the cycle of violence works, it's a repeating pattern. Again, here's this word pattern again, okay, of physical abuse. And so there is what we refer to as that seduction stage, as you just mentioned. This is the stage where he is grooming, okay? And in that stage, he perhaps is showing some physical affection, some physical attention, making promises, and also apologizing during that time, okay? And then he gets to the tension building stage. Nothing has happened physically. He has not physically assaulted at this point, okay? The tension building stage is that period of increasing pressure, okay? You perhaps may see mood swings, okay? You may even note that he becomes cantankerous, okay, or irritable. He becomes demanding. That's the tension building stage, okay? Mind you, he has groomed you where you're not on the first date anymore. This could be 6 months to a year, okay? And so we tend to excuse some things, right? We see those signs, but we are excusing them. Why? Because we are emotionally attached, okay? And then it gets to that piece where he explodes. This is where the physical attack happens, okay? This is when the abusive outbursts occur. And it's not always physical, as we noted. It could be emotional, right? It could be mental, social. So it's not always physical, but chances are it will be physical, okay? Whether it's physical, financially, socially, psychologically, it's all painful, right? And it's all considered domestic violence. And then once he finishes that, he's going to pop up and say, "Hey, I'm sorry. It will never happen again. Here are some flowers. Let me open the door for you," okay? So he is now regrooming. Right there in the center of this cycle, we have the victim, this innocent victim, who is thinking about how much she loves him, right? And how hopeful she is that he won't do this anymore, okay? Where she's dreaming about having that relationship with him that she had on the first night, the first month, the second month. Remember, those are the times when he was grooming, right? The possibility of having that really good relationship, that wholesome relationship, okay? And then she's in denial, okay? She is thinking, perhaps this really isn't who he is, right? He said this won't happen anymore, and so I'm going to believe him. Why? Because I'm emotionally attached. And then we have to look at fear. She is absolutely, all of us should be fearful, right? Whether we are being abused or not. If we know someone who is being abused, we should be fearful for her.
Right.
Okay, so fear sets in. Okay, and so that's her cycle. Okay, love, hope, dreams, possibility, denial, and fear. In his cycle is seduction, tension building, violation, and explosion. Then we go around and round and round. Okay, it's that circle, right? What the circle breaks, nobody knows, right? Because it just goes round. We don't know where the circle started. We don't know where it ends. It just goes round and round and round and round and round. And so does the abuse.
Wow. And going back to that tension building, I thought about jealousy. When he's jealous, and sometimes women may mistake that. We may mistake that as, oh, he's just being protected, or oh, he really cares. And that's not the case. That's not always the case. And it's something that we have to be mindful of when we see that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And also within that tension building stage, it's like the victim is literally walking on eggshells. She doesn't know what he's going to do next, right? She has seen it. She doesn't know what he's going to do next, so she is walking literally on eggshells, being hopeful that it won't happen again, that explosion, that tension building doesn't happen again.
Right. Often, those on the outside tend to ask the victim, why are you staying? Why don't you just leave? But it's easier said than done, and that is something that I learned during your presentation.
Okay.
Why is it easier said, why don't you, or asked, why don't you leave, or why are you staying? Why is that easier said than done?
Wow, yeah, that's another good question. It's easier for any of us to say, just walk away, okay? However, we're not living in that household where that abuse is happening, okay? If we keep in mind that her circle is replete with love, being hopeful, those dreams, that possibility that is going to desist, that denial and that fear, that's her life, okay? And so when we say, why doesn't she leave? We are being logical. That's a good question, but it's not the best question for her, okay, because she has been wounded. And so we have to begin to understand that domestic violence, again, is a pattern, okay? And it initiates with grooming. And so she's not going to be able to see what we see, right? See the need to come out of that relationship for safety purposes. She thinks perhaps, hey, if I leave, he has told me that he's going to keep the kids. He has told me that I'm ugly. He has told me that don't nobody else want me. Okay, so she has inevitably begun to believe those things. Okay, and so we have to look at domestic violence from a broader perspective as opposed to a tunnel vision. Why doesn't she get out of there? Girl, if that was me, honey, he wouldn't do that to me. Well, it's easier said than done, right? Because, again, we have to keep in mind that there is a grooming process. And as I've stated, I think it's important for us to continue to state that it didn't happen on the first date, y'all. It didn't, and it doesn't, and it won't happen on the first date, okay? Yeah.
You got 6 months to a year that you've been living in this honeymoon phase. And now all of a sudden,
hunky-dory. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. and she becomes fearful of him, you know.
Exactly. Yeah.
And because he tends to isolate her from family and friends, he knows exactly what he's doing, and that's why we say domestic violence is preventable, because it is a choice. He chooses to say to her, hey, baby, you don't have to work anymore. Well, what that's doing is allowing her to depend solely on him financially.
Right. Wow. You mentioned that previously. Let me see. Oh, I'm sorry. The question again, you know, why doesn't she leave? But people don't ask, why does the offender batter?
Yeah.
Why do you think this question is rarely asked of the offender? Why are you abusing her? Instead of asking, why don't you leave? Why are you abusing?
Yeah, I appreciate that question because that's where it starts, right? It starts with him making that informed decision that he is going to groom. He is setting her up, okay? So what we do know is one of the reasons that domestic violence happens is because society has said, hey, it's okay. Society has not held offenders accountable, okay?
Right.
I know that we're listening from across the country. However, specifically in the state of Tennessee, there are laws that won't allow domestic violence cases to be felonious offenses. In other words, they get off easy with a misdemeanor, 1129 probation, okay, and 1129 sentence, okay. And in the state of Tennessee, anyone who is sentenced at 1129 or even feloniously, they have to serve at least 30% of their sentence if they have been convicted and sentenced, okay. And so you're looking at 30% of an 1129 sentence where a man, he did hit her on the first date and she called 911. Okay? We have got to educate our judges, educate our ministers, educate the church about how we are not holding offenders accountable. That's one of the reasons that they tend to abuse. The second reason is it works. Domestic violence works. Domestic violence is preventable. However, domestic violence works. How do we know it works? Because the victim is afraid, okay? She's afraid what to say or do, and she has to think about what surviving. He knows that because he has done what groomed her, okay? And then, as I've stated, you know, the third one is it's a choice. Offenders choose to use violence to control their intimate partners, including children and other family members. It is a choice. So when someone doesn't ask, hey, why is the offender battering? These are your reasons. Because society says it's okay, because they're not going to hold offenders accountable. Domestic violence works, although it is preventable. And, of course, it's a choice, okay? Yeah. It's a choice, and the offender chooses to offend.
Right. I have more to say, but I know our time is winding up. This topic, like I said, is such an important topic. And there's a plethora of information and resources that would be beneficial. But one question I do want to ask, and it goes back to why is she staying? What are the most dangerous times for a victim, and why are they considered dangerous?
Another good question, Kelli. You are really on these questions. I appreciate it so very much because these questions have answers, and hopefully if there's someone out there that is hearing us can be able to understand this pattern and that this domestic violence is preventable and that it is a choice. So when we look at the most dangerous time for a domestic violence victim to leave, what we do know is that a victim tries to leave at least 7 times before she permanently leaves. I want you to hear me again. At least 7 times before she permanently leaves. Now, 75% of domestic violence homicides occur when the victim is in the process of leaving or has left the battle. 75% of all domestic violence homicides occur when the victim is in the process of leaving. So if she is on her 7th time trying to get out of there permanently, she is risking her life. That's why we shouldn't ask that question, girl, why don't you just leave? Right? Because here we have research and data that shows us that 75% of all domestic violence homicides occur when the victim is in the process of leaving. A victim attempts to leave 7 times permanently. Now, what that simply means, I hope that you all are following me, is that sometimes that ends in death. It ends in her murder. Okay, that's why we need to continue to have these kinds of discussions and bring awareness about this important topic so that we can help those who we believe are in situations that they need to get out of.
Right. So having said that, how can victims get out of domestic violence situations and survive?
Yeah, another good question. It's a challenge. I wouldn't dare tell anyone, hey, it's the easiest thing to do. All you got to do is get out. No. It's a challenge because one of the things that we have to recognize, again, is that he, the abuser, the offender, has groomed, okay? First of all, she feels emotionally trapped, okay? She's thinking she has nowhere else to live, okay? She doesn't want to break up her family. She honestly believes he will change, okay? That possibility within that cycle, okay? She's afraid of him. She lacks support of her family and friends. Why? Because he has isolated her intentionally, deliberately, willfully, purposefully isolated her from her family. Then she begins to think that she provoked it. She's responsible for it, that she deserves this, okay? She may not realize that it's abuse, okay? Particularly little girls and little boys who grow up in domestic violence homes, they think it's normal. And the cycle continues when they become adults. Okay, again, another reason for us to have this important conversation here. Okay, so there are situations for survival, but we have to be careful that we are providing the right kind of information to domestic violence victims. If not, we could easily aid them in their murder, and we don't want to do that, okay? We want to be extremely supportive. We want to believe them. We do not want to blame the victims. We do not want to blame the victims, okay?
That's right.
I will stand on my ground to say it's never the victim's fault. I don't care what she has done, what she hasn't done. It's never the victim's fault, and so we should never victim blame. We should be supportive and encouraging. What do you need to do should be the question to the victim who you believe is in this situation. And here's another piece. If a domestic violence victim confides in you, sisters or brothers, please do not go around telling everybody what she told you. She is confiding in you. Because if it gets back to him, the batterer, okay, who could be a prominent brother in the church, we have to keep this real, okay? It could be. What are we going to do with that information? What is he going to do now that he's exposed? So we have to be very careful. We have to approach it as gingerly as possible and ensure her that help is available. Help is available. And not only is help available, but hope is available as well. And we have a 1-800 number for crime victims of domestic violence to call. It's a National Domestic Violence Hotline number. It's available 24/7 in all different languages. Okay, and I want to make sure, Kelly, that I leave the telephone number with you. It's 1-800-799-7233. 1-800-799-SAFE, SAFE. 7233 are the last four of the hotline number. One more time, 1-800-799-7233, the National Domestic Violence Hotline number. So if you know of anyone who is in a situation, if you are the person who is in that situation and you don't know how to get out, please call that National Domestic Violence Hotline. We have got to know that we can't fix this, right? We can't just go into the house and say, she's coming out of there. No, let her have the domestic violence hotline number. You have professionals who are standing by, who know exactly what to say and what to do to aid domestic violence victims in getting to a safe place. Okay, we have shelters all across the country readily available and accessible to receive domestic violence victims so that they can get out of that situation. But it has to be done professionally.
Okay. Well, Tina, I truly thank you so much for the information.
Kelly?
Thank the Lord. Yes, ma'am. We got it. We have 3 minutes. I'm like that's why I was saying it. There's so much information that can be shared, but I definitely appreciate you tonight, and I thank the Lord for this opportunity and this forum to be able to share with our listeners. But as we end tonight's show... Yes.
Can I just say just one thing? I know we got a couple of minutes.
Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to talk a little bit about how domestic violence impacts children. Okay, real quickly. And what we know is that when children witness domestic violence within the home, there is a very strong risk factor that it will transmit over into the adulthood from one generation to the next. That's why we have got to do our part in ending domestic violence. Okay, Janet Reno, who was the first U.S. attorney under President Bill Clinton's administration, she simply said, as I end, she simply said that if you want to combat crime on the streets, we've got to combat crime in the homes because it starts in the home. One of the reasons we have so much crime on the street is because there is so much crime in our homes, and we can do better.
That's right. That's right. Thank you for bringing that out because that is a question that I wanted to ask. As we end tonight's show, additional information on domestic violence can be found stated on National Coalition Against Domestic Violence website at ncadv.org. And as Tina stated, if you or someone you know is a victim of domestic violence, there are resources available to help. National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233 or National Dating Abuse Helpline at 1-866-331-7666. 9474. I want to thank the Lord for the opportunity to share another important conversation with you. I want to thank Brother Stevie B for allowing a talk with my sisters to be a part of What a Word from the Lord radio show. As I've stated before, this show was not designed for me to do it alone, but rather to share a conversation with my sisters. So having said that, I want to thank you, Tina, once again for the information that you provided and for your expertise. I do pray that this has been beneficial to all those who are listening. If you would like to be a guest on future shows, please feel free to email me at atalkwmsisters@gmail.com. Again, that's atalkwmsisters@gmail.com. Thank you for listening, and I'll turn it over to Brother Stevie B.
You're listening to What a Word from the Lord radio show.
Give me a song to sing like Jesus. When I am face to face with my storm. Give me the voice, the word, when my enemies at my table, in the midst of my trials, Lord, give me a song. Give me a song to sing. Lord, like Jesus, when I am faced, Lord, I'm faced to face with my soul. Hey, and I need power. Give me the voice. Lord, I need the word. Well, to say to the enemies at my table, in the midst of my trial, Lord, please won't you give me a song. Ooh, look at my Jesus, he's sitting at the table, my Lord, yeah. And old Judas, he had just left to betray. Before going to the garden, Gethsemane, Jesus called for a song. In the midst of my trials, help me to do the same. Father, please give me a song to sing. Hey, just like Jesus. Lord, I am faced. When I am faced. Lord, I'm face to face with the storm. And I need my voice. Give me the voice. Lord, I need the word.
my voice.
Give me the
Help me know the right word to say to the enemy sitting right at the table.
in the midst of my trial.
My heart is breaking.
Lord,
Help me when I'm in the middle of my mind is heavy burden, but help me to sing, Lord, in the middle of my trial. Lord, I need a song like Jesus in the midst of my trial. When I'm in the middle, Lord,
You've been listening to What a Word from the Lord radio show, episode 214.
You're listening to What a Word from the Lord radio show.
God, I thank you for all blessings from on high. Yeah. Every time I sit and I count up my blessings, I'm overwhelmed at all that God, He does for me. He's given me life, health, and strength, my friends, my family. Every good and perfect gift supplies all of my needs. So I wonder how it makes God feel when we begin to doubt Him, and we ask Him, why do the trials come my way? See, no matter what comes or goes, still God is in control. So whether rain or shine, here is what I have learned to say. Why me? Why did you wake me up this morning? Why me? Why is my family doing fine? You see, I know somebody else is hurting deep inside. So I thank you for all blessings from on high. Yeah. God, I love the way you lead, guide, and protect me. Even when things don't go the way I think they should, still you are my Father, and I know you love and care for me. And even the trials of life are working for my good. But then I realize that there are those who don't even know you. They don't know about your mercy and your grace. So I wonder to myself, how could you save a wretch like me? That's when I smile and then I lift my hands and say, why me? How did your grace and mercy find me? Why me? Why do I have a abundant life? Yeah, you see, I know somebody else don't have this peace of mind. God, I thank you for your blessings from on high. Hey, 'cause I saw a man out on the street. He didn't even have food to eat. And I saw a boy strung out on drugs, a girl on the corner who was never shown love. Somebody tell me who's gonna take the time to make a difference in their lives. God, is it me? I think I finally realized. Yes, I know the reason why. I see just why you woke me up this morning. You wanna use me to try and change somebody's life. You blessed me So God, please use me every day of my